Hi everyone. Today is June 4th. That might not mean a lot to you, but to me, for the last couple of years, I've been calling that Gratitude Day. The reason why is because 2 years ago, on this very day, I had a heart attack. And if you're thinking that I'm a little too young for a heart attack, I would absolutely agree with that. And in a lot of ways, it kind of changed my life. In particular, how I'm going to spend the rest of my life. But mostly it comes down to two things. Number one, I'm grateful for whatever time I have, obviously, but also I'm going to take advantage of the time that I have remaining. Hopefully that's a long time. So I thought today what I would do is just talk about the heart attack that I had and why it's really pushed me to become a digital nomad, because why not? But before I begin, what I did want to talk about really quickly is some signs of having a heart attack. And I'll kind of discuss that a little bit when I talk about the story, but I figured if you've popped in because that's why you found this video, let's talk about them right away. So number one is chest pain. That's probably the most recognizable one, the most appropriate that you'd think. And how that feels is like this constriction in your chest. If you're feeling that, especially a feeling that's not going away or coming back a lot, even if it's minor, you should probably call 911. And then you have shortness of breath or nausea or a kind of feeling a bit feverish. But interestingly enough, a lot of people, in particular women, will have additional signs and less signs in like the traditional signs, the chest pains and that. And that's pain in the jaw, in the back, and in particular the arm and shoulders. So just because you don't feel a constriction in your heart doesn't necessarily mean you're not having a heart attack. But what is a really interesting symptom is what they call an impending sense of doom. And I know that sounds a little weird, but that one in particular probably saved my life, or at least saved me a lot of trouble, because it convinced me to call 911 and head to the hospital, which is important, by the way. In fact, if you get nothing else from this, if you think that you're having a heart attack, call 911 right away. Absolutely, because the quicker you are treated, it also means obviously a higher survival rate, but your recovery is going to be a lot better too, because as the heart attack is happening and the longer that it happens, it's actually doing a lot more damage. And so the quicker you get that taken care of, the less damage it does, the easier the recovery. And I'll tell you this right now, I got treated very quickly, and my recovery wasn't fun, but it was relatively quick, and I felt back to normal within a couple months. So as I said, in 2021, June 4th, 2021, I had a heart attack. And I'm too young to have a heart attack. It didn't make sense to have a heart attack. And I resisted calling 911 at the time, and I'm glad I didn't hesitate, because as it turns out, not only did I survive, but my recovery was a lot better. And I really appreciate that. But like, what was funny was the day that it happened, I was kind of doing a lot of errands, and I noticed that like I was very conscious of being in a bad mood. Like I was going to places, and this was like just after all the lockdown COVID, so we couldn't really go into stores and stuff, but they were still kind of open. So I'm going to these stores and I'm waiting outside, and you know, and I remember just like being in a kind of a miserable mood for no reason, right? And so it was kind of one of those funny days, and so I decided I'd order myself some dinner after all that, and I got chicken shawarma on rice, you know, where they put all the garlic sauce on top. It's really good. And I had no idea that in a couple of hours I would just be throwing that up. And so yeah, I was sitting there, I was eating my dinner, and I felt my chest really get constricted. and it was a weird sensation. It's kind of like the feeling you get when food sticks to your chest, and which is funny because I went to take a drink because that's usually what relieves you, and I had the weirdest sensation because you'd expect the water to just kind of like hit it and like help it it move down your throat and all that, but it was like the chest pain was here, and I expected the water to just kind of push it down, but instead the water just kind of went right around it, you know. And when that happened, it was a weird sensation because I didn't expect that to happen. And so I'm still experiencing that pain. The other weird thing, looking back, was I expect because my heart, you feel it on the left side of your chest, but this pain was right dead center. And so in the moment, I kept convincing myself that there wasn't anything wrong because it was in the center of the chest. It felt like heartburn. It felt like this constriction. But I did notice that it felt odd, like this was a weird experience, you know, and so yeah, I started to have a little shortness of breath, and I remember sitting there, deciding I would eat my dinner, and just kind of like that would make me feel better for some reason, and I'm trying to push down this rice and chicken, and like, I wasn't really hungry though. But I figured I should probably eat, and that would make me feel better, but it didn't. And that should have been my first sign. And so I remember at some point, um, getting angry at this, kind of irrationally, and like being angry, like, oh, that figures, like, oh, if this is a heart attack, like I'm too young to get a heart attack. I'm gonna be off work. I don't know how to handle this and all this. And I was having this like little, mini fit at home, this grumpy, kind of thing, trying to eat my chicken. And so it was funny. But prior to this, and this is what I'm talking about when I say like the signs. One particular sign convinced me to go to the hospital, was this sense of impending doom. And I remember that because over the last couple of years, my doctor had sent me to the hospitals for like, tests. Invariably, I would be sitting in some waiting room, and if you've ever experienced this, you see like all these posters on the wall, and they're telling you, well, it was COVID, so there was a lot of posters about signs of COVID and whether or not you had COVID and that kind of thing. But here, because they were heart oriented, there was a lot of signs of a stroke, signs of heart attack, and one in particular I found funny. Like I thought it was like a joke, like the normal things, chest pain, shortness of breath, jaw pain, back pain, you know, and then this one that said a sense of impending doom, and I thought, wow, that's serious. Like that's like, what does that even mean? And so of course it stuck in my memory, and but and so yeah, I thought, what does that mean? And I'll tell you what it means. In this moment where I decided that I was fine, and that I just needed to maybe nap or something, I felt this sensation, which again, I've tried to come up with a better terminology, but they've got it dead on. It's an impending sense of doom. It's not a panic attack. It's not like this, like charged anxiety that gives you all this energy and that kind of thing. It's like almost the opposite, in the sense that, like for me at least, I felt my peripheral vision just kind of like close in and everything get really dark. And it felt like without words, my brain was telling me something's bad's happening. This is really like end of the world, apocalypse, something's, and that was the moment where it shot me right back into that waiting room and that line of sense of impending doom. I was like, wow. So it was at that moment that I knew I had to call the ambulance. And again, because of all of this, like for me, it was this weird experience because it was like, this just figures. Like, I don't even know how to do this. So I had to call my friend and ask her to watch my dog. And I decided that, I wasn't going to call until I got downstairs. I live in an apartment. and I was worried that they couldn't get in up the elevator with the stretcher and everything. Turns out that's true, by the way. That was a good call. But the thing is that I should have really called the hospital right away. I should have called 911. That should have been the first thing uh, um, I did, because again, the clock's ticking, right? And so I got into this mode of like, what a pain this is. And at some point, I went and I found a big battery charger for my phone, because I figured at some point I would be sitting in a waiting room forever, just waiting and waiting and waiting. And in case they didn't take me too seriously. So I wanted to have my phone available to entertain me, because I could not imagine being there for that long a time and just staring at the walls. And, it was funny. I got downstairs. I called the ambulance at that point, and it seemed like they took forever. It was really only about 15 minutes, which is a long time, but, not as long as I thought it was. And I just remember being outside just thinking, oh man, like everybody's seeing this. And, my neighbors and everything. And that was the other reason why I wanted to do that down there. And, it was quite it was probably it wasn't the time to feel embarrassed, but I was feeling embarrassed. Like, oh, like this is too much of a bother. And if you're the type of person like me who doesn't like to be a bother, and we're, conditioned on that kind of thing, this is horrific, right? Like the unwarranted attention that is going to be involved in the next little while was crazy. And so I got downstairs. My friend showed up, and I'm so thankful that she stayed with me. And these neighbors across the road wanted to check me out too, because apparently I didn't look good. And by this point, I'm sitting on the grass waiting for the ambulance. They went and got me a glass of water to drink, which incidentally, if you're ever in that situation, blood pressure plays an important role. So they want to lower your blood pressure. So you don't want to be drinking water. Water, it raises your blood pressure a little bit. A fun fact. My underlying anxiety at this point, which is so funny to think back, but it was, I really hope this is a heart attack. I hope it's not gas. I hope it's not like an angina attack. I hope it's not just like, something I made up, like a psychosomatic response or something, or just some bad chicken. Uh, I was so worried about that, like to undergo all of this, and like for all the resources, like people showing up and like taking a spot in the emergency room and all that. Just it's my worst nightmare, and I just wanted to know whether this was a real heart attack. That was really important to me in the moment. And so while we were waiting for the ambulance, it wasn't so much that I was worried about how long this was taking and surviving the heart attack. I seriously wanted someone to show up and say, yes, this is a heart attack. All of this attention is warranted. All of this, this trouble, this burden. And the ambulance did finally arrive. And it was so funny too, because they wanted to check me out. And I'm like, can you just throw me on the stretcher and let's go? Like, come on, But so they tied me up to machines and everything. They put me in the back. I kept asking, like, what do you think? Do you think this is a heart attack? And he's like, yeah, probably. Yeah. Like, okay. And I remember getting into the back and really feeling, and this is funny too, because again, I'm not urgently worried about my imminent death. I'm worried that all of this is for nothing, more than anything. Like, I am scared. Like, don't get me wrong. Jokes aside, I'm scared, and this is a big deal. But more importantly, I needed to know that this was all justified. And when I did get to the hospital, I was like horrified, because all of these people show up, like this team of like 12 people. And they burst me in through the doors. They move me onto a new stretcher. They tie me up to new machines. There's all this activity going on. And I'm just like, oh my God, like if this is gas, like, oh, Just, oh, this is so bad. And what was really cool was there was this one dude in particular, and it seemed his job was just to like assure me that I was in the right place and that I was going to be okay, or at least I was going to be taken care of. And and so he would tell me things like, and this is all true, of course. I was at the General Hospital in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, which is a leading heart center, cardiologist's center. And if I was going anywhere, this was the place to be. And they had great doctors, great equipment, and I was going to be taken care of. And I was like, yeah, yeah, that's great. Um, so do you think it's a heart attack? And he's like, well, it does seem like, seems like, the symptoms, are like that. I'm like, oh, that's non-committal. I guess we won't know, will we? So, we finally get, and I say finally, but I mean like 2 minutes later. It's just time's really going slow. We get into this room and they're going to, they're going to perform the surgery on me. And what they're going to do is they're going to put a little wire up the vein that goes right from my wrist to my heart. And they're going to go in there, send a camera up there, check it out, unclog whatever is clogged. And I had 2 stents put in eventually. And what was interesting is they started telling me, now there's a risk of death with all of this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I think there's a bigger risk if we do nothing. So, let's just do this. And so he's explaining what he's going to do and a lot of technical terms. And to be honest, I wasn't really interested in all that because I wanted to know whether this was a heart attack. And so I said to him, okay, listen, hey, the doctor performing the surgery, I said, what do you think? Is this a heart attack? He's like, oh, yeah, yeah, a bad one. I was like, really? He's like, oh, yeah, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. And then he started talking about like, this is why we need to do this and all that. And I was like, no, 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 that's not what I meant. I'm just very, very relieved that we're going to do all this and it's a heart attack as opposed to like gas or whatever. And his face was unchanged and he's like, yeah, so we're doing the right thing. And that was that moment. That was the moment where everything was okay. Even though like I was like, 45 minutes away from being, fixed. But that was the moment where I could like sit back and go, okay, well, do your thing. Sure enough, I found myself in the ICU recovering. And the doctor came to visit me eventually, and I was feeling very nauseous. And he started telling me what we did and some of the things that, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm feeling really nauseous. Like I'm gonna throw up. And he's like really throw up, or you just feel nauseous? And I'm like, yeah, it's coming. So he went and got a bowl, and up came my and up came my chicken shawarma and rice. And I'll tell you, I felt a lot better then too. Like not as great as when I found out it was a heart attack, but I felt really, really good at that point. So yeah, it was an experience. And the funny thing is that I spent about 4 days in the hospital, and then I had to spend like about a month. Luckily, my friend hosted me because I was absolutely spent. My strength was gone. It's anyone who plays video games. The analogy I make is, when you play this game and you're leveling up and you're getting all these like new armor and new, speed boots and fun activities, and then you die, you go back to the village and you have to walk around again, but without all your stuff and you have no powers. That's it. That's what it felt like. I was like, I respawned, weak and walking around in a hospital gown. So once things got back to normal, I was kind of confronted with a lot of things, right? In particular, the idea that, nothing is guaranteed. And I started to think about all the things that I wanted to do that maybe if things went a little differently, I wouldn't be able to do. And maybe some things that I was putting off. And so in particular, I really wanted to travel and I wanted to see the world and I wanted to see all those places that I've read about. And I'm really big into history. So, I wanted to see these places for myself, and that's what I did. And the more I started to do that, the more I was enjoying it and realizing that if I can do this, there's no reason to put it off. And so that's what I'm doing, and that's why I started 28 days in, and am going to be traveling the world 28 days at a time, and visiting all these new cities, and working remotely, and figuring out how to be a digital nomad, and just experiencing the world, because nothing's guaranteed. If I don't do it now, I might not get a chance. But June 4th, Gratitude Day for me, means a little bit more too. I think it requires a little bit of giving back as well. And so I spent this morning coming up with ideas to, give back to my community, donate to charity and that kind of thing, but also reaching out to a few people and just telling them how I'm appreciating them as well. And I'm not actually a very demonstrative person, so that might have come as a bit of a shock where I was reaching out to people saying, hey, I appreciate you. I appreciate the fact that I'm in a position to work remotely and not have to go into the office and be creative. And I'm pretty valued. I feel like I'm valued at my job and that kind of thing. So, I mean, these are all things to be grateful for. And so, yeah, spread the wealth a little bit as much as I can in a more traditional way, but, in a more challenging way for me too, because I'm not really a huggy compliment guy, so that was interesting. So I encourage you too. Perhaps you have your own gratitude day. Perhaps there's some things that you want to do and take advantage of or give back. Think about what your gratitude day should be. Is there a particular date? And if you don't have one, please feel free to use June 4th. It's yours too. It's Gratitude Day. Maybe it's a thing. Maybe it'll be a thing. Anyway, happy Gratitude Day. For me, I think I'll order some chicken shawarma and rice. For some reason, I'm in the mood. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Hasta luego. A bientôt. Ciao.